Hi there, my name is Gijs. I'm from the Netherlands, obviously, and I'd like to tell you something about our corn mill here. What's so special about this mill is that it's still working on a daily basis. Wholemeal is ground here professionally, whereas most other windmills in the Netherlands are run by volunteers. And I would like to show you around. I shot some footage earlier today on how to operate the mill. You'll see that in a minute, but let's do some statistics first. The mill is 75 feet tall, that is 23 meters. The sail span is 80 feet, that is 24.4 meters. And the balcony is at 10 feet. So it's a rather tall windmill compared to other ones in the Netherlands. The grain is brought here by lorry nowadays, but of course they used to do this by wagon. And the wagons used to enter the mill through these massive doors here. You can nicely see how the road extends into the windmill. Before you start to work, you have to grease the bearings. So a normal work day starts at the very top of the windmill. We use lard to grease the bearings. After that, you have to make sure that the sails are facing the direction of the wind. If this is not the case, you have to turn the top of the mill with the sails into the wind with this capstan wheel here. I think we might have to turn it into the wind. The sails are facing into the wind, so it's time to put the sailcloth on. at the very top of the windmill again. The sails are turning merrily, and behind me you can see the transmission from the top shaft to the main shaft. These are all wooden cogs, and you use beeswax to keep them nice and smooth. We're one floor below the top level here. This is the sack hoist we use to pull up the sacks of grain we're going to grind. Now I'll just lower the rope here to ground level, and then we can pull up a sack of grain. With this rope here, I can swing this wheel intermesh with that one, and then this rope will come up. And now we can empty this bag of grain into the bin here. We're one floor below the floor where the sack hoist is located now. If I open this, you'll see the grain come out. This is the storage bin. The actual grinding stones are inside this wooden casing, so I'll use these little stones to show you how they work. So this is what a set of grinding stones looks like. There's a bed stone here and a runner stone here. Obviously the runner stone is the one that runs. The grain goes in here. It's fed into the eye of the stone, as it's called, and then it emerges as wholemeal flour around the periphery of the stone here. The pattern of furrows on the stones wears off, so every year you have to redress them using a mill bill. As you can see, the gears are not engaged, but there seems to be a fine wind, a strong wind, so I think I'll just engage them. First I need to stop the mill, of course, with the brake. If I didn't stop it, and if I would just swing them into mesh, the cogs would snap instantly, and that would be a terrible mess, of course. the eye of the stone by the feeding shoe. When the mill speeds up, because of a sudden gust of wind, the feeding shoe starts to vibrate faster and more grain enters the grinding stones. Then you need to increase the pressure of the stones, otherwise you get coarse flour. We're one floor below the floor where the grinding stones are here, and this is where you can set the gap between the grinding stones, with this row here. With this row you can increase or decrease the pressure. And you can also see how the flour is discharged into the bags here. So you listen to the sound of the grinding stone and you adjust it accordingly. And then you test the texture of the flour here, just with your hands. The wholemeal flour here is passed over the stones only once, whereas in a mechanical mill it's passed over roller mills several times. In a mechanical mill they also take out the kernel of the grain, which contains oil. But oil gives flavour to the bread, so if you ask me, I would just use wholemeal flour ground by a windmill. Also, you might have noticed that it's quiet now. I disengaged the grinding stones because I got a bit tired of having to shout all the time. This is wholemeal flour. As you can see, it still contains the bran of the grain. We use these ropes here to lower the bags of wholemeal flour to ground level. One bag of wholemeal flour ready for bakery. However, you need white flour rather than wholemeal flour to make things like pancakes, white bread and pastry. So that's why we also have this flour dresser here. The flour dresser is basically a rotating drum with different sizes of mesh on it. The wholemeal flour goes in on one side and the white flour passes through the finer mesh, and then the semolina passes through the coarser mesh, and at the very end only the bran is left. I need to close the flour dresser before I switch it on. By the early 20th century, it was clear that windmills could no longer compete with mechanical mills. The wind was simply too unreliable as a source of energy. That's why they decided to install these two sets of grinding stones driven by an electric motor here. We still use these when there's not enough wind, and we still use the original electric motor. Let's have a look. It's a German motor built by Hermann Perger in Chemnitz, Saxony around 1918, and it's still in working order. after a day of work, you have to stop the mill, of course. You put the sails down one by one and you furl the sailcloth. I've been working here for nearly 20 years now, and I still find it extremely fulfilling. There are so many aspects that make this craft fascinating. There's the weather, there's the technology of the windmill, and there's the product, for example. In my view, this craft is a piece of intangible heritage that we need to preserve. As I said earlier, most mills in the Netherlands are run by volunteers nowadays. This is a good thing. However, we need professional millers to maintain an overall level of quality and professionality in all aspects of the craft. Thank you very much for watching this video till the very end. Goodbye.